In the quiet air of New York's most expensive restaurant, the gilded sanctuary, money felt small compared to the power inside. The city's richest and most powerful people sat here, speaking softly and smiling politely, but their choices could change thousands of lives. The room was filled with burgundy velvet chairs and shining crystal lights that looked like frozen stars. A black waitress moved silently through the room. Her name was Annalise Carter, a woman who could smile like a shadow. She was almost invisible, just a small part of the perfect machine of the restaurant. For the guests, Ethelgard's was a safe place away from the noisy world. For the staff, it was a golden cage. Every step, every glass lifted, every small movement was carefully repeated like a dance. Feelings like tiredness or dreams were left behind in the staff locker room. In her locker, Annalise kept a worn copy of The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, a reminder that her mind was still bright. She was 26, medium height, with her natural curls tied back neatly. Her eyes no longer showed the wonder of her first year here. Now they were calm and focused. On the restaurant floor, Annalise worked like a stopwatch. She poured water before a guest felt thirsty. She placed bread when conversations paused. She changed plates the moment a knife touched a dish. One mistake could ruin the whole picture. She could even hear the difference between a spoon tapping a teacup, meaning a man wanted lemon, and the slight sound of a chair moving, meaning a woman was about to stand and needed her coat. She could describe fancy dishes in 3 languages, including German, which she spoke fluently. Few people knew this, and the restaurant had no interest in her skills. Invisibility was not always about class, she knew. Sometimes it was about skin color. Annalise was used to small insults, a stare that lasted too long, a man calling her sweetheart, a half-joke like, "Where did you learn such perfect English?" as if English did not belong to her. She would smile, take the order, and walk away, leaving behind invisible, little wounds. Outside the restaurant, she was Annalise Carter, daughter of Naomi Carter, a nurse, and Dr. Erich Schmidt, a German scientist. She had grown up partly in Germany, studying there through college, and even starting her doctorate in Heidelberg. Her German came not from apps but from long dinners with her father, reading poems and debating economics late into the night. But all of that life was broken 3 years ago. Tonight, Ethelgard's glowed as usual. The reservation book was packed. The wine list was worth a fortune. Annalise had checked the 2005 Petrus wine, which wealthy regulars sometimes ordered as casually as candy, making sure it was ready. She passed a mirror, fixed her collar, and calmed her breathing. In her locker, her walking canes waited for her. Late-night train ride home. The tables were little islands of old power, new money, and important people making deals that could cost someone their job by morning. A marble statue stood in the corner, like a silent Greek god. Annalise often thought, if it could speak, how many secrets would it tell? She did not know that soon someone would arrive and break her invisibility. A German conversation, in her second home language, would be used like a weapon against her as a black woman. But that same language would later become her weapon when she chose to fight back. The clock showed 8:10 p.m. The revolving door opened, and the air in the room seemed to change. The host at the desk straightened quickly. Holding a bottle of sparkling water, Annalise walked toward the VIP section, her face calm and controlled, the mask she had trained herself to wear. In this place, emotions did not protect anyone. Only discipline did. She did not yet know that Grant Blackwell had just arrived. 3 years ago, Schmidt Biosolutions, the company founded by Dr. Erich Schmidt, was about to make a huge breakthrough. It had created new water filters that were cheap, strong, and easy to use. They could turn millions of liters of dirty water into safe drinking water at very low cost. At that time, Annalise was still in Heidelberg, working on her doctoral research. She was studying how clean water technology could improve workers' lives and productivity in poor countries. Every late-night phone call with her father ended the same way. "When you come home, we'll open the first pilot plant." But then came a different call. Her father's voice was broken. Blackwell Capital, run by Grant Blackwell, had targeted the company. Friendly talks quickly turned into harsh negotiations. Promises of investment turned into threats of pulling funding. Inside the company, the takeover plan was called North Star. Rumors about money problems appeared at just the right time. A critical report about the technology's future value was released, and the company's worth dropped fast. A week after signing the final papers, pushed, threatened, and trapped, Dr. Schmidt had a stroke. Half his face was paralyzed. Anneliese put down her pen, left her studies in Heidelberg within 2 days, and came home. From then on, her life became very strict. Mornings at the care center, evenings working at Ethelgard's, late-night train rides home, then falling into bed. At dawn. Repeat. Ethelgard's was a golden cage, but the tip money was a temporary key. One lucky night could equal a week's pay elsewhere. The price was silence. She learned fast. "Sorry to keep you waiting," said warmly, with steady eye. Contact, a smile, but not begging. Some guests treated her like she was a piece of furniture. Useful, nice-looking, silent. Others were polite but cold, as if she existed only to serve. The manager, John Dubois, with silver hair and sharp eyes, demanded perfection, but protected his staff's dignity. He wasn't perfect, but he was fair. If a guest went too far, John stepped in, even if it caused problems. In this world, fairness often just meant making sure his employees weren't left alone. Anneliese survived by discipline. She worked like an athlete, ate light like a soldier, and slept whenever she could. She tracked medicine and care bills like she was balancing a bank account. Some nights, exhaustion blurred the words in her books. Other nights, she practiced German in her small room, laughing at herself as she repeated grammar rules. Then, tonight, at exactly 8 p.m., Grant Blackwell walked into Ethelgard's. He needed no introduction. He wore a custom suit like armor, his jaw square, his salt and pepper hair set like a warrior's helmet. At his side was Evan Parker, younger, quicker to smile, and fully aware of his lower position. Together they carried a weight that made even John Dubois straighten his tie. "Corner table as always, Mr. Blackwell," John said respectfully. Grant didn't answer, only gave a small gesture, as if he commanded the whole room. That was Anneliese's section. She brought sparkling water. "Good evening, gentlemen." "Still sparkling?" she asked. Evan glanced up briefly. "San Pellegrino, 2 bottles." Grant said nothing, still describing a deal. "Cut 40% of staff, keep the patents, sell the server division in 3 weeks, 50% profit margin." His voice was flat, like reading a weather report. Anneliese placed the menus with her perfect smile. "Tonight we have wild mushroom risotto with white truffle, and Dover sole meunière, prepared tableside. I'm Anneliese, and I'll be serving you." Grant looked up for just a moment. Not to remember her name, only to judge her existence in a single second. Then he looked away. She stepped back. When she returned with bread, the language at the table had changed. German. Grant spoke, quietly. Evan answered the same way. It was the language of men who wanted to talk privately, safe in New York. Anneliese gave no sign she understood. She placed the bread and walked away, as if she heard nothing. Orders were given like commands. Oysters, Rockefeller, steak tartare, 2 ribeye steaks medium rare, and a bottle of 2005 Petrus. No tasting. For most people, that meal was worth a fortune. For Grant Blackwell, it was just routine. Anneliese went down to the wine cellar. The Petrus was heavy in her hands. She thought about how many months of her father's care One glass of this wine could pay for. When she placed the bottle on the table to be poured, Grant only glanced at the label, gave a slight nod, and switched back to German. Then came the words that cut her. One phrase, one name. German could be a doorway, but tonight Grant used it, like a knife. He leaned closer, speaking in that soft, private tone powerful men used with each other. Here, service is invisible. They're like furniture. Quiet, pretty, unable to hear a thing. Evan chuckled, adding a joke about goldfish brains. Annalise's hands were steady, tilting the bottle perfectly, the red wine flowing into the glass like a whisper. On the outside, she was calm steel. Inside, she was pulled tight, like a wire ready to snap. Grant's words kept coming, sharp and cold. North Star, our masterpiece. Old man Schmidt believed every word we told him. The name North Star hit her like a stone in water. Memories returned. Heidelberg, the lab, the smell of chemicals, a memo with torn edges. Her father's work, his trust, all of it rushed back. Still her hands did not shake. The wine streamed smoothly. Evan raised his glass. The final blow was the long-term report. That signature sealed it. He mentioned Mark Peterson, and they both laughed. Annalise noticed Evan's laugh ended sharply, trained, like someone performing on command. Grant kept boasting, describing, the lies and rumors they had spread, the fake analysis claiming the filters would fail in 5 years, the investors who panicked, the lifeline Blackwell Capital offered that the company was forced to grab. His tone was casual, but the cruelty was heavy, like a stone pressing on the chest. Then Evan sneered. That old man even talked about scientific ethics, like ethics pays the bills. Grant laughed too, his eyes flicking toward Annalise for just a second, as if she were only an object in the room. Look at her. She's probably just thinking about tips for rent. They still spoke German, but the meaning was clear in any language. Annalise finished the decanting, poured wine for Grant and Evan, then stepped back into the proper waiting posture. Silent. Unmoved. Around her the restaurant's sounds blurred. The clink of cutlery, a spoon stirring, a chair shifting. Ordinary noise that suddenly felt distant, as if from another planet. She thought of her father. The man who read her German poetry with a warm voice, who explained science by dipping a spoon into sugar water, who once told her, "Ethics won't make us rich, daughter, but it will make everything else worth the wealth." She saw him again, half his face frozen, still squeezing her hand with surprising strength. And then, absurdly, she remembered a grammar drill. Genitive des Goldfischs, the genitive of goldfish. She almost smiled. In that meaningless moment, she saw Grant's weakness. He used German as a wall, assuming she couldn't find the door. But the door was grammar, and grammar was hers. The main course arrived, ribeye steaks sizzling. Annalise placed them without a single mistake. No spill, no sound. And this time, she didn't step back. She stood tall, spine straight. Grant frowned. "Is there a problem?" he asked in English, his tone more commanding than questioning. The air shifted. Evan held his breath. At nearby tables, people began to glance up, sensing tension. Annalise took a deep breath. Every unspoken rule of the restaurant, don't interrupt, don't speak first, don't use the guest's language, she was about to break. She looked Grant Blackwell in the eyes. When she spoke, it was in clear, flawless academic German, her voice steady and sharp like steel. "Mr. Blackwell, there is indeed a problem." The words dropped heavy onto the table. Evan choked on his wine, coughing, face red. Grant froze for 2 seconds, his mask of control shaken. The German wall he had built had just been shattered. Annalise stayed in German, refusing to switch to English. First, a correction. One doesn't say brain of a goldfish like that. The genitive is des Goldfisches. If you want to use language to prove superiority, At least get the basics right. The restaurant went silent. Few understood the German, but they understood the power shift. Evan stared at the floor. Grant's face turned purple with anger. He tried to pull the room back by switching to English. "Who the hell do you think you are?" But Annalise gave him no bridge. Still in German, she said, "You want to know who I am? I'm not just a waitress worried about tips. I graduated top of my class in economics. I studied in Heidelberg. But the name you should remember is not mine." She paused just long enough for Grant to scramble through his memory. Her voice, her accent, the pieces of the past. "Clean water. Schmidt. I am Annalise Carter," she said firmly. "Daughter of Dr. Erich Schmidt." Grant recoiled in his chair as if struck. Cutlery at far tables froze in mid-air. Evan tried to speak. "We could—" But the words died. Annalise didn't raise her voice. She spoke like a prosecutor, each word precise and heavy. North Star was a campaign of lies. Panic was manufactured. Rumors planted. A falsified report signed by Dr. Mark Peterson in return for a promise of a board seat. Annalise spoke of her father's stroke, 1 week after being forced to sign the papers. She remembered the night in the hospital when he squeezed her hand so hard. "You didn't just take his company," she said. "You broke the spirit of a scientist." Then her voice dropped low, only for the table to hear. "That Petrus you're drinking tonight. Do you know how many months of care for my father it's worth?" Grant shot to his feet, his chair scraping across the floor. "You're fired!" he shouted. But behind Annalise, manager John Dubois appeared like a shadow. Calmly he looked around the room, catching the eyes of the powerful guests, then spoke clearly. "Miss Carter is my employee. In my restaurant, I do not allow guests to abuse my staff. Perhaps it is you who should leave." No one clapped loudly, but murmurs rippled across the room. Annalise placed the check beside the untouched ribeye. "Your bill, Mr. Blackwell, including the Petrus." Her words struck like an ethical invoice. Grant looked at the bill, at Annalise, then at the room. Finally, he threw down a wad of cash, grabbed his coat, and stormed out. Evan followed, small and silent, behind him. The doors closed. For 2 heartbeats, silence filled Ethelgard's. Then soft applause spread, quiet but real. Annalise walked to the kitchen. The door shut behind her and her armor cracked. Her knees weakened. Her breath came in bursts. Tears she had held back for 6 months finally came. The chef placed a glass of water beside her. John rested a hand on her shoulder. "Tonight, you didn't stand alone." The stainless steel walls felt cold against her back. She drank, slowing, her heartbeat. John stood in front of her, giving both space and support. "You're not fired," he said gently. "I'll take the rest." Annalise only nodded, unable to say thank you without breaking. The staff gave her quiet respect. They didn't touch her, but they didn't look away either. In a place where workers usually stood alone, that solidarity kept her from collapsing. After a few minutes, John said, "Take the rest of the night off. I'll handle the paperwork." He knew calls and threats would come, but Ethelgard's balanced, on dignity as much as money. Tonight, dignity had won. Annalise changed clothes, folded her uniform neatly, and picked up her bag. Her worn book waited in her locker like an old friend. At the back door, she paused for a breath before stepping out. Inside the dining room, shock still lingered. Grant's chair sat askew, his absence heavy. Murmurs fluttered across the tables, but now eyes followed Annalise not as a servant but as someone acknowledged. At a window table sat Evelyn Reed, a reporter for the New York Chronicle. She had been meeting a source but had witnessed something bigger. She didn't understand German, but she had seen power shift hands. She had recorded the ending, Grant shouting, John defending, the applause. That was enough. Evelyn waited until the room settled, then spoke with 2 diners. One had studied in Berlin and caught words like North Star, Schmidt, Peterson. The other noted the waitress had corrected German grammar, rare and telling. They didn't need a full translation. They smelled a story. At the host stand, Evelyn handed her card to Marta, the receptionist. "If the manager needs me, I'm here." Marta made no promises but thanked her. A small crack in Ethelgard's wall of silence. Outside, Evelyn replayed. Her recording. The scrape of a chair, Grant's roar, John's defense, the applause. She noted, "Waitress speaks German, names mentioned. North Star, Schmidt, Peterson, Grant Blackwell, Evan Parker, John Dubois." She texted her editor, "We've got a story." Suggested headline, "The Billionaire and the Waitress at Ethelgard's." Reply came quick, "Go." Back at the newsroom, Evelyn dug into the public record. Grant Blackwell, takeovers, layoffs, profit above all. Then she searched Schmidt Biosolutions, clean water technology, signs of a hostile takeover 3 years earlier. She even found a leaked analyst report that once used the term North Star. The puzzle pieces fit, but the missing piece was the waitress. Evelyn needed a name. The next morning she returned during shift change. Marta quietly shared, "Her name is Annalise. No last name, but enough." Evelyn's team searched. Soon they found 3 possible matches. A delivery invoice with the name Carter. A blurry photo of a woman in uniform leaving a late-night train. Enough to connect. Evelyn hesitated to knock on Annalise's door. The line between reporting truth and invading privacy was thin, so she sent an email. "I'm Evelyn Reed, a reporter. I want to protect you from distortion. If you want to tell your side, I'm here." No reply came. Evelyn drafted the article without Annalise's voice. Instead, she wrote about what the room had seen. The clash of power and dignity, the language switch, and the manager who defended his staff. She left placeholders for North Star, Schmidt, Peterson. To confirm overnight, Evelyn called the newspaper's lawyer to check the wording of her article. In journalism, even a small word could be dangerous. Near 3 a.m., she filed the story. The editor replied, "Run it in the morning edition at 6:30. The headline read, "The Billionaire and the Waitress at Ethelgard's." A German conversation that exposed manipulation. Evelyn dozed in her chair, coffee cooling, pen still in her hand like a soldier refusing to let go. On the late-night train, Annalise leaned her head against the dark glass. New York passed by like a reflection. Her phone was silent. She hadn't called her mother yet. She knew she had broken one of Ethelgard's unwritten rules, and in the morning, the outside world's rules would come. At 6:32 a.m., the article went live. By 7:05, it was on the hot news front page. By 8:10, hashtags began trending. Ethelgard's Waitress and Speak Truth to Power. Hospitality workers praised John Dubois for defending his staff. Finance and tech circles focused on just 3 words: North Star, Schmidt, Peterson. At 9:30, the PR team at Blackwell Capital panicked. A draft apology was written. Respect for service workers, lessons learned, but no mention of North Star. The lawyers said, "Don't touch it." But investors weren't lawyers. If the long-term report was false, the risk was huge. At 9:47, an internal email went out. Emergency leadership meeting 10:15. Cut ties with Evan Parker first. At 10:12, Evan's phone buzzed. "You're suspended. Stay home." He wasn't surprised. Those close to power are the first to be thrown away. But the shock still felt like falling. At 10:30, the boardroom filled. Grant Blackwell sat at the head. His smile from last night was gone. Someone whispered, "What about Mark Peterson? If the reporter digs..." Legal cut them off. "Don't say the name here." The CFO asked about losses. PR admitted, "Impossible to project, but big." Gratitude faded quickly in the face of risk. At 11:05, Evelyn got emails from diners who had used translation apps the night before. They confirmed hearing phrases like 5-year report, final nail, and board seat. Not legal proof, but strong evidence. She updated her story at 11:22. Independent witnesses confirmed the German talk about North Star, a falsified report, and Peterson. By 12:01, the SEC noticed. An internal message read, "See Chronicle piece. Check if any companies falsified reports in acquisitions 3 years ago." It wasn't an investigation yet, but the first look had begun. At 1:40 p.m., Blackwell Capital issued its official statement, apology for inappropriate language, and Evan Parker was out. Still no mention of North Star. Public reaction: weak, dishonest, throwing an underling under the bus. In her Queens apartment, Annalise sat before her old laptop. Notifications kept buzzing, unknown numbers calling. She silenced the phone. One email stood out. Robert Chen, CEO of Phoenix Holdings. Subject: Your father's legacy. She didn't open it right away. She read Evelyn's article twice. Evelyn had withheld her last name, calling her only Annalise, the waitress. The piece was fair, not sensational. Relief washed over her. Then she opened Robert Chen's email. He wrote simply. He had once tried to work with Schmidt Biosolutions. He was saddened by how it ended. He admired the strength she showed. Phoenix Holdings was starting the Ethical Innovation Initiative, funding technologies that helped people without selling out to greed. If you're interested, my door is open. This is not charity. This is a job offer. Annalise read it twice. The world had shifted so quickly it made her dizzy. She thought of John, of Grant's purple face, of her father's hand squeezing hers. She replied, "I need 48 hours to think." That afternoon, Evelyn stood outside Annalise's building. She didn't knock. She texted, "I won't bother you. If you want to talk, I'll listen. If not, I'll still write fairly." Annalise replied, "Thank you. For now, I want silence. But you captured what mattered." Evelyn looked at the gray sky. In her work, silence could mean hope. By evening, Blackwell Capital tried again. At 7:12 p.m., Grant read an apology on video. The words were right, but his eyes were wrong. Viewers saw no sincerity. Comments poured in. Not genuine. That night, Ethelgard's was packed. People came to see the place where power had been shaken. John stood at the door, steady as always. The storm wasn't over, but the fortress had chosen dignity over wealth. The next morning, Annalise arrived early. She wanted to speak to John. He was already in his office, coffee ready. "You don't have to work today if you don't want," he said. "I'll have Michelle cover." She showed him Robert Chen's email. He read it carefully, nodding. "Sounds like a real way out. Remember, you don't owe me. I helped because it's my job, and because I don't like people who talk trash in a language they don't even know." Annalise laughed softly. She hadn't decided yet, but something inside had shifted. By midday, she was walking into Phoenix Holdings, a modest glass building, unpretentious. Robert Chen greeted Annalise with a warm handshake and the look of someone who truly saw her. He didn't ask about the night at Ethelgard's first. Instead, he asked about her unfinished dissertation in Heidelberg and the impact model she had built. Annalise spoke about measuring value beyond profit: clean water preventing illness, money saved on health care, stronger local supply chains. Robert listened carefully, as if gathering stones to build a foundation. He slid a folder across the desk. "We're about to launch the Ethical Innovation Initiative. I want you to design the framework. You'll have a small but capable team, a modest budget, and the authority to reject deals that make money but harm people. I don't want to use your story as advertising. I want your mind." Annalise didn't answer right away. She asked tough questions. how conflicts of interest would be handled, whether she would have veto power if projects lost their ethical focus, what protections there were for people who said no. Robert handed her a draft charter, an independent ethics committee, whistleblower protections, transparency reports. Not perfect, but real. At the end, Robert asked gently, "What's holding you back?" Annalise looked at her hands. "Fear of trading one gilded cage for another." "Your world is still a fortress, just in different colors." Robert nodded. "True, but here, you can hold the key. You can design the door yourself. Give it a try." That evening, Annalise called her mother. They spoke of her father, of the poems he read, the nights they dreamed of clean water. Naomi said, "You've arrived at the place your father most wanted to see you, where you can do good on a bigger scale." That sealed it. Annalise emailed, "I accept, but I want to start with one thing, assessing the chance of reclaiming my father's clean water patents." Robert replied within 15 minutes. "Agreed. Legal will support. Start Monday." On her first day at Phoenix Holdings, Annalise found an empty room, but empty in a good way. A table, a whiteboard, and 3 people. Priya, impact analysis, Miguel, engineering, and Lena, legal with a human rights background. They looked at her not as a symbol, but as their leader. She hung a chart on the wall: ethical flow design, idea, technical due diligence, impact modeling, ethical criteria, people, environment, transparency, capital structure that protects mission. Responsible, exit. Their first test was Vidian Dynamics, 2 young engineers with biodegradable plastic. The financials were weak, the slides unimpressive, but the science was real. Miguel tested samples, Priya calculated waste reduction. Lena checked supply chains for forced labor. Annalise concluded, "Invest, but add a mission clause, no sale," to investors who ignored ethics. Robert signed. Meanwhile, Phoenix's legal team began tracking Schmidt Biosolutions patents. Some were with a Blackwell shell company, others pledged to a bank. But Blackwell was bleeding. Holders of risky assets wanted out. Annalise and Lena drafted an offer: buyback cheap, fast, with no admission of guilt. Sometimes doing good required speaking the language of pragmatism. On the side, Annalise wrote a memo. "Don't make me the story. Let the story be the system we build." By week's end, Phoenix announced its investment in Vidian. Reporters asked, "Is this because of Annalise Carter?" Robert answered, "Because of the data." Annalise stood silent beside him, not out of modesty but because she knew noise could kill the work. Late at night, she stood at her office window looking down at the river of New York lights. Far away, Ethelgard's still glowed. She thought, "Some cages you open yourself, when you dare to hold the lock. This one is named Phoenix, and the key is in my hand." On Monday morning, Phoenix's legal inbox carried a note: "Federal agency inquiry regarding Schmidt Biosolutions. Respond only through counsel." Not an alarm, but a signal. Annalise stayed calm. She passed her family's thin file to Lena: certified receipts, a faint email labeled North Star, and a handwritten note from her father. "Do not agree to the 5-year failure projection. No data supports this." At the same time, Evelyn Reed's follow-up appeared in the Chronicle. She had spoken to 3 former Schmidt employees. 2 confirmed they'd seen a suspicious long-term report. She tried calling Dr. Mark Peterson. No answer. But by noon, Peterson's lawyer told him, "You need to talk." In a rented room, Peterson sat hollow-eyed. He whispered the sentence lawyers like Lena had heard many times: "I was wrong. Can I cooperate?" It was the start of a proffer session. Truth in exchange for mercy. Across town, Grant Blackwell faced his board. The apology video had failed. "The problem isn't tone," one director said. "It's conduct." Another reminded them of the investor clause. If the leader fails, investors can pull out. Grant stayed silent. He knew goodwill dies, but legal risk does not. By 5:01 p.m., the news broke. Grant Blackwell would step down as CEO. The words were polished, familiar, but the meaning was clear to those who understood. The unraveling had begun. On Tuesday, Annalise was served a subpoena as a witness. She was asked about the timeline, what she had heard in German that night, and the documents her father had passed to his lawyer. She sat with Lena in a small deposition room, answering simply, never guessing. If she didn't know, she said, "I don't know." Simple words were the best shield. That afternoon, Evan Parker, suspended since day one, received a courier envelope. Inside, termination papers. No meeting, no goodbye, just the end. He stared at the page, then slid it into a drawer. His apartment was silent, like the air before a storm. No one called. That night, Annalise wrote in her notebook, "We don't hunt heads. We fix systems." She reminded herself of the difference between justice and revenge. Whenever Grant Blackwell's name rose in her thoughts, she returned to her first question. How do we get clean water to the people who need it? Protected. This time from greed? 2 days later, Phoenix got good news. The bank holding patents from a Blackwell shell company wanted to sell. Lena called. "We'll offer X amount, immediate cash, with no admission of liability." Silence on the other end. Then, agreement. Sometimes justice walked through the door of pragmatism. That same day, Dr. Mark Peterson's lawyers sent a letter offering cooperation with the government. The news spread quickly. Evelyn Reed's article described him not as a villain, but as a flawed scientist trying to turn back. "Without people like Peterson reversing course," she wrote, "the system cannot correct itself." Annalise read it without joy. To her, it was just another lever moving the water flow back to the right side. By Friday, Phoenix signed a letter of intent to purchase Schmidt's patents. Robert Chen emailed, "Good. Next step, protect the mission." Annalise replied, "I want the patents placed in a public trust." Robert answered, "Do it." That night, she came home and looked at a photo of her father smiling in the lab, believing technology could ease life. Outside, the city was loud. Inside, she felt a soft click. Another door to her past closing. 3 weeks later, the deal closed. Schmidt's water filtration patents were in Phoenix's hands. No big press conference, just a single line in an internal report. Annalise and Lena registered the Schmidt Water Trust. Its rules: free licenses for nonprofits, low-cost licenses for poor municipalities, open-source manuals, and required transparency on water quality. Any revenue would go back into training local technicians. Bria built the impact framework: reduced illness, hours saved from fetching water, health costs lowered, school attendance rising. Miguel redesigned the filters for easy maintenance, with local materials and manuals in native languages. The first pilot, Clear Start 01, launched in a storm-damaged U.S. county. At Riverton Elementary, 10 new taps were installed. Priya worked with a clinic to track illness data. Not miracles, just steady graphs. The second pilot launched in Kudra, West Africa, with NGO partner Blue Horizon. Lena added a skills transfer clause so local technicians, not outsiders, would own upkeep. One hot afternoon under a tin roof, Annalise sat with Awa, Kofi, and Musa, talking about filter cleaning and tracking sheets. When the first tap ran clear, she didn't cry. She stepped back and let Awa open the valve. Kofi check, Musa sign. Children laughed nearby. Adults stayed cautious. They'd seen promises fade before. Priya whispered, "The data will tell us." Annalise nodded. "And ownership will keep it here." News slipped into a local paper, then a national one. Trust licenses clean water under open terms. No photo of Annalise waving a flag. No slogans. Robert insisted, let the work speak. Meanwhile, Vidian Dynamics, their first project, released a biodegradable packaging. Early data, 72% decomposed within 90 days. Robert called Annalise the architect in an internal email. She smiled and filed it away. Evelyn Reed called, I'd like to write about the trust, but I won't tie it to Ethelgard's if you don't want. Annalise replied, write about the technicians in Kudra, the clinic in Riverton. The article ran with a photo of Awa filling in a tracking chart. Headline, When Technology Leaves the Boardroom. Quiet praise followed. A good sign. 3 months later, the government announced a formal investigation into Schmidt Biosolutions. Allegations, falsified reports, information manipulation. Peterson was named as a cooperating witness. Grant Blackwell remained stepped down. A financial journal wrote, An empire built on fear often falls to truth and process. Late one night, Annalise called her mother. They didn't talk about Blackwell or Evelyn. They talked about Eric Schmidt, how he once stirred soup with one hand while sketching a filter design on a pizza box lid. Annalise laughed, smelling the memory of cheese. She looked at his photo and whispered, I've taken it out of the boardroom, Dad. At Phoenix, the team grew. She added new safeguards to the system, so next time a North Star couldn't destroy a legacy. Then, one afternoon, an email arrived. From Evan Parker. Subject, I know I have no right, but please, 5 minutes. She read it 3 times. She could have ignored it. But she remembered her mother's words. How we treat the weaker says more about us than about them. She nodded to herself and replied, 1 p.m., Daily Grind Cafe. The next day, Evan was already there, sweater frayed, eyes hollow. He jumped up too quickly when she walked in. Thank you for coming, he said, hands restless. I've lost everything. Job, reputation, even my fiancé. I blamed everyone. But the truth is, I knew North Star was dirty. I looked away. I wanted to be him. Annalise listened quietly, neither forgiving nor condemning. Evan's voice was rough, but steady. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to start over without lies. After a pause, she said, Redemption doesn't start with forgiveness. It starts with what you do next. Don't make me your judge. Choose a job no one claps for. Evan asked. Like what? The Water Commons Coalition needs someone to manage supply chains, valves, gaskets, boring work, real impact, or train technicians. Sit in a warehouse, check parts, make sure they arrive, no bragging, no spotlight. Just do it. Evan nodded like a thirsty man finding water. Who do I email? Annalise wrote an address. She didn't smooth the path. If he wanted it, he had to walk it. He hesitated. And Peterson? She looked out the window. I'm not the judge. I just hope he tells the whole truth. So the system learns, not just punishes. Then she turned back. I can't promise. It will be okay. No one can. Evan gave a small, tired smile. That's fine. I don't need a promise. I need something to do, Evan said. They stood. This time his thanks was short and sincere. Annalise left the cafe without looking back. At the corner she paused, seeing the sky reflected in Phoenix's glass building. She didn't see victory. She saw a map, thin lines connecting small choices to real change. 3 weeks later, Evelyn Reed texted, Just so you know, I saw a new name at the Water Commons Coalition. Not for a story, just thought you'd want to know. Annalise didn't ask questions. She simply replied, Peace to all of us. At Phoenix, the Clear Start team received Riverton's second-month health report. Student illness had dropped compared to last year. Priya didn't cheer. She just noted, "Need third month to confirm it's not seasonal." In Kudra, Awa sent a photo of children lining up with clear bottles. Miguel replied instantly, "Don't forget the backwash this week." Their language was not English, French, or German. It was the language of steady process. That night, Annalise placed a sheet of paper in front of her father's photo. She wrote, "Dad, I've learned to say no at the right time, and I've learned something else. Turning the lock is daily work, not a single act." She folded the note into her old Keynes book. Theory, practice, memory, 3 layers to keep her balanced. Exactly 1 month after the confrontation, Annalise made a reservation at Ethelgard's. For the first time, she entered through the front doors. John Dubois greeted her warmly. "We've kept the corner table for you." His words weren't flattery. They were acknowledgement. The room looked the same. Velvet chairs, crystal lights. But for Annalise, everything had shifted. Ethelgard's was no longer a fortress keeping her out. It was now a place she could choose to enter or leave. Her server that night was Maya, a young woman with watchful eyes. She introduced the menu nervously, just as Annalise had years before. Annalise smiled to calm her. "I'll have the Dover sole with lemon butter and a glass of Sancerre." Dinner was simple. No Petrus, no speeches, just good food. At other tables, business talk flowed on. Annalise ate slowly, savoring the taste of ordinary peace after storms. Halfway through, Evelyn Reed walked in. Not chasing a story, just meeting a friend. They nodded politely, then went separate ways. In another corner, a Phoenix engineer whispered about polymer tests. Separate streams flowed in the same room. When John asked if all was well, Annalise said, "It is, and thank you for that night." John shook his head. "Thank you for reminding us who we are." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a note in Chef Antoine's handwriting. "A glass of water for the one who stood in the right place." She folded it and slipped it into her wallet. At the end of the meal, Annalise left an envelope for Maya, a generous tip and a note. "You did well. Remember, your breath guides your hands. Your hands guide the floor." No promises, just a small anchor for her night. On her way out, Annalise paused by the marble statue she once thought carried untold stories. Tonight, she didn't need it to speak. Her own story had already moved beyond this room, into trust agreements, clean taps, steady illness charts, and a quiet job application at a water coalition. Words more lasting than any toast. Outside, New York breathed deep. Annalise pulled her coat close and called Naomi. "Mom, I just had dinner at Ethelgard's. It was good." Her mother laughed. "Did you tell them you used to work there?" Annalise smiled. "No need. I left a note for a girl named Maya." "That's enough." Days later, Phoenix posted its ethical pledge in plain words. Profit without crushing dignity. Technology without silencing voices. Exits without leaving harm behind. Annalise read it not as its writer, but as someone bound by it every day. Legally, the investigation moved quietly. Financial press noted hearings, transcripts, possible settlements. Grant Blackwell was rarely seen. One photo showed him rushing from a building, eyes down. Annalise felt no joy, only the balance of an equation. One weekend night, she opened her old Keynes book and added to her letter, "Dad, I will keep designing the locks, and I will teach others where to place their hands." She thought of the night German changed the field, not for its drama, but because it was the pivot that turned a larger mechanism. She understood now. The power of a voice is not in how loud it is, but in how it connects truth to action. In New York, Maya was likely clearing tables. In Kudra, Awa was marking the week's filter log. In Riverton, a child was drinking safely. In a small office, Evan Parker was checking parts shipments. No applause. None needed. Annalise turned out the light. The ghost of Ethelgard's was gone. In her place stood an architect, not of restaurants, but of systems that keep water flowing. When money changes its mind, that was enough. And so ended the journey of Annalise Carter, from a quiet shadow in a luxury dining room to the architect of protections for the public good. Her story shows the power of a voice is not in its volume, but in how it links truth to action, turning justice into real, lasting change.